Commander Jake Morrison watched the screens in front of him as strange ships appeared in space above Earth. The ships were huge and dark, bigger than anything humans had ever built. They came from nowhere, appearing like ghosts in the black of space. Jake had been commanding the battlecruiser Phoenix Dawn for 3 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The alien ships sent a message to Earth. It was simple and cold. The creatures called themselves the Zelkari Empire. They wanted humans to give up without a fight. If humans refused, the aliens would destroy every city on Earth. They would take the survivors as slaves. The Zelkari thought humans were weak and stupid, just another race to conquer and use. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. Earth was their home. They would not give it up without a battle. Jake picked up the communication device and spoke to all human military forces around the world. His voice was calm and strong. He told them that today, humanity would show these aliens what humans could really do. Captain Lisa Hayes was on Luna Base when the first attack began. She led a squadron of fighter ships, small and fast compared to the alien vessels. Her pilots were young and brave. They had trained for years to protect Earth from threats, but they never expected threats from space. When the Zelkari ships began moving toward Earth, Lisa gave the order to attack. The human fighters dove toward the alien formation like angry wasps. The Zelkari had powerful shields and weapons, but they fought in straight lines and predictable patterns. Lisa and her pilots flew in wild, crazy paths that confused the alien gunners. They hit the enemy ships and quickly moved away before the aliens could shoot back. The Zelkari had never fought anyone who moved like this. On Earth, Admiral Ben Carter worked day and night to organize the planet's defense. Before the aliens came, Earth's nations often fought each other. Now they had to work together or die together. Ben brought together armies, navies, and air forces from every country. He made them into one fighting force with one goal: protect Earth. The Zelkari attacked major cities first. Their weapons could destroy entire buildings with single shots. But humans did not panic. They fought back with everything they had. Soldiers used rockets and missiles against the alien ships. When those ran out, they used regular bullets. When bullets ran out, they threw rocks and bottles. The aliens had never seen anything like human stubbornness. Dr. Amy Chen worked in a secret laboratory under New York City. She studied pieces of destroyed Zelkari ships that human forces had shot down. Amy was brilliant with technology. She could understand how alien machines worked just by looking at them. Within days, she figured out how Zelkari shields and weapons operated. More importantly, she found ways to make them better. Amy shared her discoveries with human engineers around the world. They worked without sleeping to build new weapons using alien technology, mixed with human ideas. The new human ships were faster and stronger than anything Earth had ever created. They could fight the Zelkari on equal terms. Major Ryan Torres led ground forces when the aliens tried to land on Earth. The Zelkari sent soldiers in heavy armor to capture important cities. These alien warriors were tall and strong, with thick skin that could stop bullets. But Ryan and his soldiers were smarter. They used traps and tricks to defeat enemies they could not beat with strength alone. Ryan's most famous victory came in the ruins of Chicago. 1,000 Zelkari soldiers had taken control of the city center. Instead of attacking them directly, Ryan's men pretended to retreat. The aliens followed them into the subway tunnels under the city. Ryan had filled the tunnels with explosives. When the aliens were deep underground, he set off the bombs. The tunnel collapse trapped the entire alien force. The war lasted 6 months. Humans learned to fight better every day. They studied alien tactics and found weaknesses. They built new weapons and ships. Most importantly, they never gave up. Every time the Zelkari thought they had won, humans would attack from a new direction. The turning point came when Jake Morrison led a desperate mission to capture the main Zelkari command ship. The alien flagship was protected by dozens of smaller vessels, but Jake had a plan. He loaded his ship with volunteers and flew straight at the enemy fleet. While the other human ships attacked from all sides, Jake's crew used transport pods to board the alien flagship. The fighting inside the Zelkari ship was brutal and close. The aliens were bigger and stronger than humans, but they were not used to fighting in their own corridors. Ryan Torres led the boarding party through the ship's passages, using human weapons designed to work in tight spaces. They fought their way to the command center where the Zelkari admiral controlled the entire fleet. When Ryan and his soldiers burst into the command room, they found the alien admiral surrounded by his officers. The Zelkari commander was huge, with 4 arms and skin like metal. He expected the humans to kill him in battle. Instead, Ryan ordered his men to capture the alien alive. This surprised the Zelkari more than any weapon could have. With their leader captured, the Zelkari fleet stopped fighting. The alien officers could not understand why humans had not killed their admiral. In Zelkari culture, defeated enemies always died in battle. The idea of taking prisoners for negotiation was completely foreign to them. This confused them and made them afraid of what humans might do next. Jake Morrison brought the captured Zelkari admiral to Earth. The alien leader met with human diplomats and military commanders. For the first time, the Zelkari realized that humans were not like other races they had conquered. Humans could be merciful to enemies, but they could also be more dangerous than any species in the galaxy. The Zelkari agreed to leave Earth alone. They had learned that conquering humanity would cost more than any victory was worth. As their ships disappeared into space, humans began to understand something important. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they were strong enough to defend themselves against anyone who threatened their world. The galaxy had learned that humanity would fight back against any war declared against them. 7 years had passed since the Zelkari War ended. Humans had built colonies on 12 different worlds and created a strong space fleet. They thought they were safe from alien threats. They were wrong. A new enemy was coming, and this one was unlike anything they had faced before. The Vex Collective was not alive in any way humans understood life. They were machines, billions of connected computers that thought as one mind across dozens of star systems. For thousands of years, the Vex had brought order to chaotic parts of the galaxy. They calculated the best solutions to every problem and forced other species to follow their logical plans. Dr. Amy Chen had been studying reports from human scouts who met the Vex at the edge of human space. The machine intelligence saw humanity's rapid growth as a problem that needed to be solved. Humans were unpredictable and emotional. They made decisions based on feelings instead of pure logic. To the Vex, this made humans dangerous and wrong. The war began when Vex ships arrived at New Geneva, humanity's newest colony. The machines did not send warnings or demands for surrender. They simply began attacking with cold efficiency. Their weapons fired in perfect patterns, and their ships moved in formations calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum waste. Captain Sam Rodriguez commanded the defense of New Geneva from his cruiser Defiant Spirit. Sam had fought in the Zelkari War and knew how to handle alien tactics, but the Vex were different. They predicted every move his ships made and countered with mathematical precision. Traditional human battle strategies seemed useless against machine logic. The siege of New Geneva lasted 3 weeks. The Vex surrounded the planet and slowly destroyed the colony's defenses. They calculated exactly how much firepower was needed for each target and never used more than necessary. Their attacks were perfectly efficient, but they were also perfectly predictable. Dr. Amy Chen worked day and night in her laboratory, trying to understand how the Vex thought. She studied their attack patterns and found something interesting. The machines always chose the most logical solution to every problem. They could not understand why anyone would make a choice that was not the best possible option according to their calculations. Amy realized this might be the Vex weakness. Humans often made decisions that seemed crazy or stupid, but worked anyway. Sometimes the worst plan succeeded because nobody expected it. The Vex could calculate every logical response to their attacks, but they could not predict human illogic. Captain Sam Rodriguez proved Amy's theory during the battle for the civilian transport Peaceful Dawn. The ship was filled with families trying to escape New Geneva. A Vex destroyer was chasing them, and Sam's cruiser was too damaged to win a normal fight. The logical choice was to retreat and save his ship and crew. Instead, Sam did something the Vex could not calculate. He turned his damaged cruiser around and flew straight at the enemy destroyer. He planned to ram his ship into the Vex vessel, destroying both ships but saving the transport. To machines that valued efficiency above all else, this choice made no sense. Why would someone choose certain death when retreat was possible? The Vex destroyer's computer systems tried to calculate Sam's real plan. The machines believed no intelligent being would sacrifice themselves for others without some logical benefit. They spent precious seconds running calculations, trying to find the trick in Sam's attack. By the time they realized Sam really meant to ram them, It was too late. Both ships exploded, but the civilian transport escaped. News of Sam's sacrifice spread through the human fleet. Instead of discouraging the other captains, it inspired them to fight harder. Lieutenant Colonel Kate Sullivan began using similar tactics with ground forces on New Geneva. She ordered her soldiers to make attacks that seemed suicidal, but were actually carefully planned psychological warfare. Kate's soldiers would charge straight at Vex positions, screaming and shooting wildly. The machine soldiers were programmed to respond to logical military tactics. They could not understand why humans would attack positions they could not possibly capture. The Vex spent processing power trying to figure out the real human plan instead of simply fighting. This confusion gave human forces the advantage they needed. While Vex computers calculated possible strategies, human soldiers flanked their positions and attacked from unexpected directions. The machines were so busy trying to solve the puzzle of human behavior that they forgot to defend themselves properly. Admiral Ben Carter, now commanding all human space forces, saw the pattern of Vex confusion and decided to use it. He ordered all human ships to abandon standard military formations and attack patterns. Instead of fighting like a normal fleet, they would fight like a mob of angry individuals who happened to have spaceships. The strategy worked. Vex battle computers were designed to fight organized military forces that followed predictable rules. They could not handle hundreds of ships attacking in completely random patterns with no central coordination. Every human captain made independent decisions based on instinct and training instead of following orders from headquarters. Commander Alex Wright led the mission that ended the war. Amy Chen had discovered the location of the Vex Central Nexus, a massive computer complex that coordinated all machine activities in this part of the galaxy. Alex volunteered to lead a team to infiltrate and destroy the Nexus. Getting to the Nexus was dangerous but not impossible. The Vex had calculated the minimum defenses needed to protect their most important facility. They had not considered that humans might be crazy enough to attempt a direct assault on such a well-defended target. Alex and his team fought their way through the Nexus defenses using tactics that made no logical sense. They split up when they should have stayed together. They attacked the strongest positions while ignoring easier targets. They wasted ammunition on unimportant systems while ignoring critical ones. To human eyes, their assault looked like chaos. To the Vex, it was impossible to predict or counter. When Alex reached the central core of the Nexus, he found something unexpected. Instead of trying to destroy the massive computer system, he had a different idea. Amy Chen had given him a special program designed to introduce a new concept into Vex thinking. The program would not destroy the machines, but it would change how they thought. Alex uploaded the program into the Vex central core. The new code spread through the entire collective network in seconds. For the first time in their existence, individual Vex units began to experience something they had never known: the ability to make personal choices. The concept of individual free will spread through the Vex network like a virus. Machines that had always followed collective decisions suddenly found themselves able to think independently. Some Vex chose to continue following the old patterns, but others decided to try new things. The perfect unity of the collective shattered as millions of machines began making different choices. The war ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The Vex collective broke apart into thousands of smaller groups, each following their own interpretation of logic and efficiency. Some groups remained hostile to humans, but others became curious about the species that had taught them to think as individuals. Humans had faced an enemy that seemed unbeatable and found a way to win without violence. They had shown the galaxy that even perfect logical systems could be changed by the simple human idea that everyone deserved the right to choose their own path. The machines had learned to think like individuals, and humanity had gained new allies among the stars. The attack came from the edge of known space like a living storm. Billions of creatures moved together as one vast organism, consuming everything in their path. They were called the Kreth Swarm, and they had devoured entire galaxies before turning their hunger toward human space. Unlike the logical Vex or the proud Zelkari, the Kreth had only one purpose: to feed and grow. Dr. Paul Mason watched the first reports from the frontier colonies with growing horror. He had been a combat medic during the Vex War before becoming a xenobiologist. Paul studied alien life forms to understand how they worked and how to fight them if necessary. The Kreth were unlike anything he had ever seen. The creatures looked like giant insects, but they were more complex than any earth bug. Each Kreth was connected to every other Kreth through some kind of biological network. They thought together, moved together, and fought together as parts of one enormous mind. Individual Kreth could not exist alone anymore. Then a human finger could live without being attached to a hand. Captain Rachel Stone commanded the defense of Kepler Station when the swarm first entered human territory. The station was built around a massive research facility where human scientists studied captured alien technology. Rachel had expected to spend her career fighting pirates and smugglers, not defending humanity against a species that wanted to eat everyone. The Kreth attacked in waves that seemed endless. Thousands of creatures would swarm over human defenses, dying in huge numbers but always pressing forward. When one wave was destroyed, another would appear immediately. The hive mind did not care how many individual Kreth died, as long as the swarm kept advancing. Rachel and her defenders fought desperately to protect Kepler Station. Human weapons could kill individual Kreth easily enough, but destroying a few thousand creatures barely slowed down an enemy that numbered in the billions. The swarm learned from each attack, adapting their tactics to overcome human defenses with frightening speed. Dr. Paul Mason studied captured Kreth specimens in his laboratory while the battle raged outside. He dissected the creatures and analyzed their biological systems. What he found was both fascinating and terrifying. The Kreth were perfect organisms for their purpose. Every part of their bodies was designed for killing, eating, and reproducing. But Paul also found something that gave him hope. The Kreth's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Because they all shared one mind, they could coordinate perfectly, but they could not adapt to truly unexpected situations. The hive mind could only think in one way at a time, even though that mind was incredibly powerful. Paul's discovery came too late to save Kepler Station. The swarm finally overwhelmed the human defenses and consumed the research facility. Rachel Stone and her surviving crew escaped in the last transport, bringing Paul's research data with them. The loss of Kepler Station was a disaster, but Paul's findings gave humanity a chance to fight back. The swarm's next target was Haven, an agricultural world that fed dozens of human colonies. Captain Rachel Stone had been given command of Haven's defense force, a collection of military units and civilian volunteers who had never worked together before. Rachel knew she could not fight the Kreth the same way other human commanders had tried. Instead of organizing her forces into a unified army, Rachel did something that seemed crazy. She split her defenders into hundreds of small, independent groups scattered across Haven's surface. Each group operated without central command, making their own decisions about when and where to fight. To outside observers, it looked like chaos. The Kreth hive mind could not understand Rachel's strategy. The swarm was used to fighting organized enemies with clear command structures and predictable tactics. When the Kreth landed on Haven, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to have no plan at all. Small human groups would attack Kreth formations and then disappear before the swarm could respond. General Marcus Webb coordinated the larger human response to the Kreth invasion from his command ship in orbit above Haven. Marcus had fought in both previous alien wars and understood that conventional military thinking would not work against the hive mind. He developed what he called the Chaos Protocol, a new way of fighting that abandoned traditional military organization. Under the Chaos Protocol, human forces were encouraged to act on instinct rather than following detailed battle plans. Commanders at every level were told to make quick decisions based on what they saw in front of them, instead of waiting for orders from higher command. This created a battlefield environment so unpredictable that the hive mind could not adapt fast enough to counter it. The strategy worked better than anyone had expected. Kreth forces would mass for a major attack only to find that their target had moved or changed. Human defenders would appear where the swarm least expected them and vanish before the Kreth could bring their superior numbers to bear. The hive mind's perfect coordination became a liability. When facing an enemy that had no coordination at all, Sergeant First Class Diana Ross proved that individual human courage could defeat even the hive mind. Diana was part of a reconnaissance team studying Kreth breeding sites on Haven's northern continent. These sites were where the swarm created new creatures to replace their losses. The breeding chambers were heavily defended and seemed impossible to attack. Diana volunteered for a mission that everyone knew was suicide. Dr. Paul Mason had developed a special biological weapon designed to disrupt the Kreth's shared consciousness. The weapon would not kill the creatures directly, but it would force them to think as individuals instead of parts of the collective. Diana would have to get close enough to the main breeding chamber to release the weapon. Getting into the Kreth breeding site required Diana to crawl through underground tunnels filled with hostile creatures. She moved alone because a larger force would have been detected immediately. Diana spent 3 days working her way through the tunnel system, avoiding Kreth patrols and automated defenses. When she finally reached the central breeding chamber, she was exhausted and injured. The breeding chamber was a massive organic structure that pulsed with alien life. Thousands of new Kreth were being created every hour to replace the swarm's losses. Diana planted Paul's biological weapon at the center of the chamber and activated it before the Kreth guards could stop her. She died fighting the creatures that tried to prevent her from completing the mission. The weapon's effects spread through the Kreth network faster than anyone had expected. Within hours, individual Kreth across the entire swarm began experiencing something they had never known: independent thought. For the first time in their species' history, Kreth started making personal decisions instead of following the collective will. The change destroyed the swarm's ability to function as a unified force. Individual Kreth began questioning orders from the hive mind. Some creatures stopped fighting and tried to understand their new thoughts and feelings. Others became confused and panicked when they realized they were alone inside their own minds. The perfect biological machine that had consumed galaxies fell apart as its components learned to think for themselves. Captain Rachel Stone led the counterattack that drove the remaining Kreth forces off Haven. The creatures were no longer the unstoppable swarm they had been before Diana's sacrifice. They fought as confused individuals instead of parts of a greater organism. Human forces that had barely survived the initial invasion now found themselves winning decisive victories against a disorganized enemy. The war ended when the hive mind itself began to fragment. Paul Mason's biological weapon had not just affected individual Kreth, it had changed the fundamental nature of their shared consciousness. The single vast intelligence that had controlled billions of creatures split into millions of smaller minds, each trying to understand what it meant to exist as an individual being. Some former Kreth sought revenge against humanity for destroying their collective identity. Others were grateful to have discovered individual consciousness and wanted to learn more about the species that had given them this gift. Most simply left human space to explore their new ability to make personal choices about their own lives. Humanity had faced an enemy that seemed to represent the ultimate form of biological perfection and had shown them something better. The Kreth had learned that being part of a collective was not the only way to exist. Individual choice and personal freedom could be more powerful than any hive mind, no matter how perfect its coordination might be. The Eternal Dominion had ruled the center of the galaxy for 50,000 years. Their empire was older than human civilization, older than most species currently alive in the galaxy. They had watched young races rise and fall like waves on an ocean shore. When reports reached them about humanity's victories against the Zelkari, Vex, and Kreth, the ancient rulers barely paid attention. Another primitive species would soon learn its place in the natural order. Admiral Tony Clark commanded the Joint Human Defense Fleet when the Dominion finally decided to deal with the human problem. Tony had served in all 3 previous wars and understood that each alien enemy required different tactics. But the Dominion was unlike anything humanity had faced before. These were not conquerors or destroyers. They were gods who had forgotten what it meant to be challenged. The Dominion's world ships appeared at the edge of human space without warning. Each vessel was the size of a moon, powered by captured stars and armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. The ships moved slowly through space not because they lacked speed but because their occupants saw no reason to hurry. They had waited 50,000 years to deal with humanity. They could wait a few more weeks. Professor Janet Lee studied ancient Dominion artifacts that human explorers had found on dead worlds throughout the galaxy. Janet was an archaeologist who specialized in studying extinct civilizations. What she discovered about the Dominion was both impressive and disturbing. Their technology had remained essentially unchanged for tens of thousands of years. The Dominion rulers were immortal beings who had achieved perfect knowledge of science and technology. They saw no need to improve or change their methods because they had already reached the ultimate possible level of advancement. Their weapons, shields, and ships represented the absolute peak of what any species could achieve. Or so they believed. Janet's research revealed the Dominion's critical weakness. They had become so confident in their superiority that they had stopped innovating. Their immortal leaders made decisions based on strategies that had worked for millennia. They could not imagine that younger species might develop new approaches to warfare and technology. Chief Engineer Mike Foster led the human effort to develop new weapons capable of fighting the Dominion. Mike had worked on reverse engineering alien technology since the first HFY War. He understood that humans could not match the Dominion's raw power, but they might be able to surprise them with tactics and weapons the ancients had never seen. Mike organized research teams on dozens of human worlds, each working on different aspects of the technological challenge. Unlike the Dominion's centralized approach to innovation, human scientists shared information freely and built upon each other's discoveries. Progress that would have taken the Dominion centuries to achieve happened in months. The key breakthrough came when Mike's teams discovered how to combine technologies from all three previous alien enemies: Zelkari energy shields, Vex computational systems, and Kreth biological components could be integrated in ways that none of the original species had imagined. Human hybrid technology was crude compared to Dominion perfection, but it was also completely unpredictable. Captain Nicole White commanded the strike force that would test humanity's new weapons against the Dominion fleet. Nicole had been Jake Morrison's student during the HFY War and had learned that sometimes the best way to fight a superior enemy was to make them fight on your terms instead of their own. The Dominion expected humans to meet them in traditional fleet combat, where superior firepower and shields would guarantee victory. Instead, Nicole's forces scattered across multiple star systems and began hit-and-run attacks that confused the ancient strategists. Human ships would appear, launch attacks with experimental weapons, and vanish before the Dominion could respond effectively. Each attack taught humans more about Dominion capabilities, while forcing the ancients to adapt to completely new tactical situations. Mike Foster's teams analyzed the results of every engagement and developed new weapons specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Dominion technology. Human innovation accelerated, while the Dominion struggled to modify strategies they had not changed in millennia. The war's first major battle occurred when Nicole White led a direct assault on a Dominion world ship above the colony of New Terra. The ancient vessel was protected by energy fields that could deflect any known weapon and was armed with cannons that could destroy entire fleets. Nicole's attack force consisted of small, fast ships equipped with untested human hybrid technology. The Dominion commanders watched the human approach with confidence. Their shields were impenetrable and their weapons were overwhelming. They calculated that the battle would end within minutes of the first exchange of fire. They were wrong. Nicole's ships attacked using weapons that combined Vex targeting computers with Kreth biological components and Zelkari energy systems. The resulting weapons behaved in ways that Dominion science said were impossible. Energy beams that should have been deflected instead passed through shields as if they were not there. Missiles that should have been destroyed by defensive systems instead adapted and found new paths to their targets. The ancient world ship suffered damage for the first time in thousands of years. Its immortal crew could not understand how primitive human technology was penetrating defenses that had stopped entire fleets of advanced civilizations. They began making tactical errors as they struggled to counter weapons that violated their understanding of physics. Nicole pressed her advantage by ordering attacks on multiple world ships simultaneously. Human forces were too small to destroy the massive Dominion vessels, but they could damage and confuse them. Each successful strike encouraged other human commanders to attempt similarly bold assaults throughout Dominion territory. The psychological effect on the Dominion was more devastating than any physical damage. The ancient rulers had believed themselves invincible for so long that the possibility of defeat had become literally unthinkable. When human weapons began penetrating their defenses, many Dominion commanders simply could not process what was happening. Admiral Tony Clark coordinated the final assault on the Dominion capital system. The ancient homeworld was protected by thousands of defense stations and patrol fleets, but Tony had learned that the Dominion's greatest strength could also be its weakness. Their perfect coordination meant that disrupting their command structure could paralyze the entire system. Instead of attacking the heavily defended homeworld directly, Tony's forces targeted the communication networks that linked Dominion forces together. Human hackers trained on captured Vex technology infiltrated ancient computer systems and introduced chaos into previously perfect coordination. Dominion fleets began receiving contradictory orders and conflicting information. The capital systems' defenses collapsed not because they were destroyed, but because they could no longer function as a unified whole. Individual Dominion commanders had not made independent tactical decisions in centuries. When their central command system failed, they were paralyzed by their own perfection. Nicole White led the final strike team to the Dominion throne world itself. The ancient rulers waited in their crystal palaces, still confident that their ultimate weapons would stop the human assault. They activated planetary defense systems that had never been tested in actual combat because no enemy had ever come close to threatening the capital. The Dominion's ultimate weapons were indeed powerful enough to destroy entire fleets, but they had been designed to fight conventional enemies using traditional tactics. Nicole's forces attacked in patterns that the ancient defense computers could not predict or counter. Human ships dove through defensive fire that should have killed them, using experimental shields that bent space itself to deflect incoming attacks. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Dominion, but with their surrender. The ancient rulers finally understood that their 50,000-year reign had made them weak through complacency. They had achieved perfection in an older era of warfare, but they had not adapted to face an enemy that refused to follow the old rules. Humanity offered the defeated Dominion something their own pride would never have allowed them to give an enemy: a chance to learn and grow instead of simply being destroyed. Some ancient rulers accepted the opportunity to discover what they had lost through millennia of stagnation. Others retreated to distant galaxies, unable to accept that their age of dominance had ended. The galaxy learned that even perfect civilizations could fall if they stopped changing and growing. Humanity had shown that innovation and adaptability were more powerful than ancient wisdom and overwhelming force. The young could teach the old, and the future belonged to those willing to embrace change rather than cling to past glories. 7 years had passed since the fall of the Eternal Dominion, and the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Humanity had not conquered their defeated enemies, but had instead transformed them into allies. Former Zelkari warriors served alongside human soldiers. Independent Vex units shared their computational power with human research teams, and reformed Kreth scouts used their enhanced senses to protect human colonies. This transformation terrified the Galactic Tribunal, an ancient organization that represented over 1,000 civilizations across multiple galaxies. The Tribunal had maintained order for millions of years by ensuring that each species knew its place in the cosmic hierarchy. They had watched humanity's victories with growing alarm, not because humans were conquering the galaxy, but because they were changing it. Captain Greg Taylor commanded the defense station Terra Firma, humanity's newest orbital fortress. His crew was unlike any military force in galactic history. Former Zelkari officers worked alongside human tacticians, planning strategies that combined the best elements of both species' military traditions. Independent Vex units provided computational support that could predict enemy movements with mathematical precision, while reformed Kreth scouts gave the crew sensory capabilities far beyond normal human limitations. Greg had served in all 4 previous wars and understood that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their tactics, but their ability to turn enemies into friends. The crew of Terra Firma proved this principle every day. Species that had once tried to destroy each other now worked together as smoothly as parts of a single organism. Commander Lauren Adams coordinated intelligence operations from her mobile command ship, the Wandering Star. Lauren's staff included representatives from dozens of species that had joined humanity's growing alliance. Each alien advisor brought unique perspectives and capabilities that made the combined force more effective than any single species could be alone. The Tribunal's approach to the human problem was different from previous alien invasions. Instead of sending a single species to conquer humanity, they assembled the Grand Armada, a massive fleet representing hundreds of different civilizations. The Tribunal believed that overwhelming diversity would counter humanity's tactical advantages. What the tribunal did not understand was that humanity had already solved the problem of fighting diverse enemies. Every species in the Grand Armada used different technologies, tactics, and strategies, but humans had faced and defeated or converted representatives of most major galactic civilizations. The experience of fighting so many different enemies had taught humanity how to adapt to any opponent. Dr. Paul Mason, now Director of Xenobiological Defense, studied intelligence reports about the approaching Grand Armada. Paul had learned during the Kreth War that understanding an enemy's psychology was often more important than understanding their weapons. The Tribunal's greatest weakness was their rigid belief in hierarchical order. The Grand Armada expected to fight a traditional war where superior numbers and firepower would guarantee victory. They planned to overwhelm human defenses through sheer diversity, using so many different attack methods that no single defense could stop them all. The Tribunal strategists had calculated that even humanity's adaptability had limits. Captain Nicole White led the first engagement against Tribunal scouts near the Proxima system. Nicole's task force included ships from 7 different species, each contributing unique capabilities to the combined fleet. When the Tribunal scouts detected this mixed force, their initial reaction was confusion rather than alarm. The scouts reported back to the Grand Armada that humans had somehow convinced multiple hostile species to work together voluntarily. Tribunal commanders could not understand how this was possible. In their experience, different species only cooperated when forced to do so by superior authority. The concept of voluntary alliance between equals was foreign to their hierarchical thinking. This confusion gave humanity and its allies crucial advantages in early battles. Tribunal forces would prepare to fight human tactics only to encounter Zelkari aggression, Vex precision, or Kreth adaptability. When they adjusted to counter alien strategies, human unpredictability would strike from unexpected directions. The Grand Armada found itself fighting not one enemy, but dozens of different approaches to warfare used in perfect coordination. Admiral Jake Morrison, now commanding the entire Alliance fleet, understood that this war would not be won through military victory alone. The Tribunal represented the old way of thinking that kept species separated by fear and mistrust. Defeating them would require proving that cooperation was stronger than domination. Jake's strategy was to demonstrate the power of voluntary alliance through every battle. Instead of trying to destroy Tribunal forces, Alliance fleets would disable enemy ships and offer their crews the choice between returning to the Tribunal or joining humanity's coalition. Many alien warriors who had been forced to fight for the Tribunal chose freedom over hierarchy. The war's turning point came during the siege of Kepler Prime, humanity's most important research facility. The Tribunal committed a significant portion of the Grand Armada to destroying the facility, believing that eliminating human scientific capabilities would cripple the Alliance. They were wrong about what made humanity's science so effective. Commander Lauren Adams coordinated the defense of Kepler Prime, using a strategy that would have been impossible without alien allies. Human researchers worked alongside Vex computers to develop new technologies in real time. Zelkari warriors provided combat experience that helped humans design more effective weapons. Kreth biologists contributed insights that led to breakthrough discoveries in alien psychology. The Tribunal attack force found itself facing defenses that evolved faster than they could adapt to counter them. Every hour of battle brought new human innovations based on alliance cooperation. Weapons that worked against the attackers in the morning were obsolete by afternoon as human-alien. Research teams developed better solutions. Captain Steve Johnson led the diplomatic mission that would end the war. Steve had been a junior officer during the Zelkari invasion and had seen how humanity could transform enemies into allies through demonstration rather than domination. His mission was to reach the Tribunal leadership and offer them what no galactic power had ever offered before: a choice. Getting to the Tribunal's mobile capital required Steve's diplomatic ship to penetrate the heaviest concentration of enemy forces in the galaxy. The Grand Armada protected the Tribunal leadership with thousands of warships representing hundreds of civilizations. Breaking through such defenses should have been impossible for a single ship. But Steve's ship was crewed by representatives of every species humanity had encountered. Former enemies worked together to overcome obstacles that would have stopped any single species. Zelkari aggression opened paths through enemy formations. Vex calculations found weaknesses in tribunal defenses. Kreth adaptability allowed the ship to survive impossible situations. And human creativity tied everything together. The diplomatic meeting took place aboard the tribunal's massive command vessel, a city-sized ship that served as mobile capital for their empire. Tribunal leaders expected humanity to offer terms of surrender or to make threats about what would happen if the war continued. Instead, Steve Johnson offered them something they had never considered: partnership. Steve explained that humanity's alliance was not based on conquest or domination, but on voluntary cooperation between independent equals. Each species contributed their unique strengths while maintaining their own identity and freedom. The alliance grew stronger as more species joined because diversity was treated as an asset rather than a problem to be controlled. The tribunal leaders initially rejected this concept as impossible. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that order required hierarchy and that different species could only coexist under strong central authority. The idea that voluntary cooperation could be more effective than enforced obedience contradicted everything they believed about government and civilization. But the evidence of the alliance's effectiveness was impossible to ignore. Humanity and their allies had fought the Grand Armada to a standstill despite being vastly outnumbered. More disturbing to the tribunal was the fact that increasing numbers of their own forces were defecting to join the human alliance. Species that had been loyal to the tribunal for centuries were choosing freedom over security. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. Some tribunal member species chose to maintain the old hierarchical system, but others decided to experiment with humanity's approach to interspecies cooperation. The galaxy began splitting into two different models of civilization: the traditional hierarchy of the remaining tribunal and humanity's growing alliance of voluntary partners. Captain Greg Taylor watched from terra firma as former enemy ships joined the Alliance fleet. Each new arrival represented another species that had chosen cooperation over domination. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had become the catalyst for that transformation. Admiral Jake Morrison understood that humanity's greatest victory was not defeating their enemies, but showing them a better way to live.